Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into Chapter 1 of Tiso Dzomolok's incredible new book. We're looking at a profoundly urgent concept, what it actually means to have the right to narrate. If you have ever felt this pressure to quiet your authentic voice the second you stare at a blank page, well, stick around. This deep dive into narrative authority, it might just completely change how you write. So the book is called Write/Rate to Narrate. Now, it's specifically framed as a fiction writing guide for young Chicana and Chicano writers. But honestly, Tiso Dzomolok's lessons here on writing with memory, style, and real presence, they offer a massive, powerful framework for literally anyone who feels that heavy pressure to translate themselves before speaking. Here is our roadmap for this Chapter 1 masterclass. We'll start with the danger of doubt, define what narrative authority actually is, learn from 3 amazing literary mentors, Cisneros, Rivera, and Gonzalez, and then wrap it all up with some practical steps for claiming your own page. All right, Section 1, the danger of doubt. You know, it's wild, but before anyone even teaches you how to write, they almost always teach you where not to speak. Tiso Dzomolok points out this really strange irony. Writers are often taught to basically erase themselves in the pursuit of quote-unquote good craft. You've probably heard it yourself, right? Make it more universal, or hey, make it a little smoother. A teacher might only praise your draft once the barrio or the sentimiento, that raw, lived feeling, is totally scrubbed away. It's almost as if you have to sanitize your sentence before it's even allowed to breathe. Moving on to Section 2, defining narrative authority. So, how exactly do we push back against that kind of subtle silencing? Well, Tiso Dzomolok argues that we have to totally redefine the right to narrate. Because look, it is not some permission slip handed down to you by an institution or a fancy editor. Not at all. It begins with your presence. You earn your authority by knowing the meaning of a space, knowing a pressure or an experience from the absolute inside out. You don't pause to ask if your materials are literary enough. You just enter them with exactness. That brings us to Section 3, Cisneros and the Name. To really see this in action, Tiso Dzomolok points to Sandra Cisneros. Think about the house on Mango Street. Her character literally says, "In English, my name means hope. In Spanish, it means too many letters." This is so brilliant because Cisneros is flat out rejecting the official dictionary definition of hope. Instead, what she's doing is putting that name under pressure to reveal the actual, lived reality and the defiance of a bicultural identity. She isn't right. And notice the exact phrasing she uses here, one I could point to. Instead of writing this vague, abstract sentence about, seeking a space of dignity and upward socioeconomic mobility, Cisneros grounds that desire in a physical, everyday public gesture. Pointing. Pointing means there is public evidence. It means the body doesn't have to hide its address or walk around carrying shame. The text goes straight from a vague, lofty concept right into tangible contact. Okay, Section 4, Rivera and the Fragment. Here is a really fascinating thought. Sometimes a perfectly polished narrative structure is actually a lie. Just look at Tomas Rivera's work. In his writing, the world arrives in these fragments, overheard thoughts, pieces of communal memory. He writes that the spoken word was the seed of love in the darkness. Tiso Dzomolok really highlights that these fragments, they aren't a failure to write a standard, cohesive novel. No, they are a brutally honest reflection of an interrupted, migratory life. The brokenness of the text isn't a failure of craft, it's a mirror reflecting a life lived under pressure. Section 5, Gonzalez and the Historical I. Our third mentor here explores the raw power of a collective narrative voice. We're looking at Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez. The I in I Am Joaquin is definitely not a private diary entry. Tiso Dzomolok explains that this I is actually a historical vessel. The speaker is simultaneously one person and many people, wounded yet completely defiant. Gonzalez teaches us that your first-person voice can absolutely widen. It can stretch to carry the heavy weight of history, of ancestry, and of cultural survival. So when we contrast these approaches side by side, the difference is just night and day. Take a look at a failed universal version. It relies heavily on those approved institutional buzzwords, right? Words like identity, resilience, roots, community. And sure, it sounds academically correct, but let's be real, it's emotionally dead. It tells us exactly what to think before we even have a chance to feel anything. But by contrast, look at a grounded version. It uses exact, concrete nouns. A house, a shoe, a cracked plate. It dramatizes instead of summarizing. And that is exactly what Tezozomuk means by true sentimiento. All right, final part. Section 6, claiming your own page. So how do we actually put all this into practice as writers? Well, ask yourself this first. What are you interpreting from the inside? Is there a really specific name, maybe a weird family rule or a word from back home that you intimately understand? You have to start with the material that's already attached to your own lived experience. Next up, audit your vocabulary. Seriously, are you leaning on sanitized, sanctioned words like identity or trauma? Tezozama gives a really strong warning here. You need to earn those concepts first. You earn them through concrete, pressure-bearing scenes before you just hand them over to your reader. And that brings us right back to that incredible lesson from Cisneros. What is the physical evidence that is grounding your narrative? Is it a scuffed work boot? Is it a cracked plate on the kitchen table? You have to find those tangible, touchable objects that carry the actual physical weight of your story. Then you need to think about structure. Does your story truly need a smooth, traditional essay format, or does the real pressure of your specific memory demand fragments? Does it need vignettes or raw testimonies, much like we just saw in Tomas Rivera's work? Finally, interrogate your first-person pronoun. Is your I isolated and alone, or can it enter into relation? You need to challenge your I to carry the weight of your family, your place, your labor, and your history, exactly like Corky Gonzalez demonstrated. You have to let the self widen. Chapter 1 of Tezozamuk's book leaves us with this insanely powerful directive. Do not start by proving your world is important. Enter the world so precisely that importance becomes unavoidable. I just love that. The right to narrate isn't about politely asking for a seat at the table. It is about writing with such unapologetic, vivid detail that the page literally cannot ignore you. Now, if this is just chapter 1, imagine what else is required to truly find your voice. So I'll leave you with this. What exact, unavoidable truth are you going to commit to the page today?